time to paint some tiny dudes with Toppy. This video we're going to look at how to paint Ork Skin. This is what I tend to call my natural Ork skin tone. Not as vibrant as the traditional Ork skin tone. I like to think it's more of how a green skin would naturally look. So it's a bit more muted, much more olive tone. And in order to do that, I have got a knob, freshly undercoated. The very first thing we have to do before we actually paint skin is we're going to do all of the metal will get dry brushed, because this is going to be very messy, so it will get all over the place and get in the way. So we want to do it now when there's nothing to mess up. This is Vallejo Game Color Cayman Green. This is my preferred Ork skin tone base color. Give that a good shake. Probably doesn't pick up very well on camera. Now, I do sometimes use other colors for my basic skin tone, but this is the one I use most of the time. So we're just going to brush that onto all the skin areas. Try and be fairly neat with it, but we don't need to be perfect. Now, if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, wait a minute, you've based this entire technique on Cayman Green. What kind of lunatic has Cayman Green? This will work with any olive green base. Vallejo Heavy Green, the extra opaque color. Model color Military Green, that gives quite a nice result. Game color Yellow Olive. And of course Camouflage Green can be used for your highlights as well. So there's our Cayman Green base coat. We'll need to leave this to dry for a second. I usually paint in batches of about 5 minutes at a time, so by the time I get to the paint on the last one, it's already dried on the first one and I can go back and do the next coat. But since I'm demoing, just working on one guy here, we're going to have to wait for him. Alright, now that base coat is dry, we can start in on some highlighting. So Cayman Green again. This time we are going to be adding a little bit of, this is Golden Olive. It's a model color, Vallejo model color. I use both model color and game color. Sometimes you just can't get what you want in game color. Model color tends to be a little bit more subdued, more realistic in heavy scare quotes there. Sometimes I find you just need to use model color to get what you want. So I'm going to mix up roughly a half-half mixture of Cayman to Golden Olive, using my big fat old brush, the one I use for dry brushing. I think I need a little bit more Golden Olive there. This is not an exact science, I kind of make up a mixture every time. Just needs to roughly be halfway between the two. That looks okay. Quick rinse. Back to my decent brush. And now we're going to start painting all the raised areas in this brighter shade. And hopefully the camera cooperates with the focus and so forth. We're going to pick out all the raised areas with this shade. Now on the hands, we're going to paint along the back of each finger and down the sort of the tendon, raised tendon line that all orcs have on the backs of their hands. Kind of difficult to see how well this is actually working on camera. Put the camera screen open directly in front of me. I'm trying not to headbutt it. It's kind of exactly where my face would usually be in terms of closeness to the model. my head kind of needs to occupy the same space as the camera. So if we occasionally slide off sideways and the figure's a bit out of shot, it's because it's kind of a weird experience painting on camera. Okay, that's our first round of highlights done. I think the camera's focusing on that okay. Does seem to be doing some slightly odd things to the colour balance. This looks yellower in real life than it seems to on the camera, but there we go, first round of highlights done. So what we'll do now is go to a second round of highlights, just using a pure version of Golden Olive. This is a more obvious highlight because the colour is much brighter. And we're doing effectively the same thing, but just smaller areas. Go. You can see there's now distinctly shades and highlights. His muscles are all popping quite nicely, showing up as different areas, different masses. So there's one last stage here on the skin. This is Vallejo Game Color Dead Flesh. Give that one a bit of a shake. My dead flesh is a bit separated because I don't use very much of this. Hopefully we're good. A little bit of dead flesh. There we go. That's more than enough, but it's on the wet palette, so it'll stay fresh. So what I'm going to do with the dead flesh is a final extreme highlight. And this just goes on the most raised areas that I want to draw attention to. Now all his highlights are done. We've got the knuckles picked out, we've got the extreme highlights on his face to pick that out, we've got the elbows and things. If he had scars, I'd probably give those the extreme highlight as well, just to call attention to the edges of the scars. So now, we're going to pause the video for a second while I get the colours to paint his teeth. If you're a dentist, you probably want to look away now because I'm about to start working on orc teeth, and although orcs love orc teeth, they're not using them for the same thing that we would be using them for, and orc teeth are pretty gnarly. So what we would usually do here is start off with a nice desert yellow. I can't find my Vallejo desert yellow at the moment. I may have run out. I'm pretty sure I've still got some. I'm not sure where it is. So instead, we've got two options here that will both work. We've got Green Stuff World's Arrakis Brown, which is pretty close to Desert Yellow, and this is Vallejo Game Color Extra Opaque Heavy Gold Brown, which is what I use for the base of my yellow. It's pretty close to Desert Yellow. I'm going to use Arrakis Brown this time. Green Stuff World paints have got built-in agitator balls, so you can just enjoy listening to that. Alright, let's get some of this on the palette. Have a quick look at what we've got so far. He has got a heck of a lot of tongue, so I think I'll actually have to do the tongue as well at this stage, because this does involve a wash and that will go on the tongue, and that, you know, I want the wash to hit the tongue as well. So teeth first, then we'll deal with his tongue, then we'll do the wash. We're going to need to wait for this to dry for a little while, because obviously usually I'll be painting about 4 or 5 figures at once, and by the time I get to the last one, you know, the teeth on the first one are finished, but just painting one at a time, it's going to take a little while to dry. Back again to the dreaded orc dentistry. Okay, ivory tusk now, green stuff world colour. Basically, there's that agitated ball again. Basically your standard bone colour. Like Vallejo's bone white and Citadel's old bleached bone. I haven't used Citadel colour for so long, I don't actually know what their equivalent's called these days. Anyway, we're going to use this to highlight the teeth. Now, this is going to be a pretty heavy-handed highlight, the first highlight, so most of the tooth gets painted. There we go. Obviously you have to hit the one that's hanging off his wrist there. So the final step is going to be our last highlight, which is going to be just pure dead white. We're going to leave that for a second, and we're going to do his tongue. So I've got gory red here. I've got ember orange, which is pretty close to, what was that Vallejo colour? Fire red or something? No, bloody red, which is basically Citadel's old blood red. You know, also infamously, you know, referred to as blood orange because it's very, very, very bright red. Any sort of combination of reds would work. I sometimes paint orc tongues purple or even blue on occasion, so I'm going to start off by just painting his tongue and any of the inside of his mouth that's going to be really visible with a nice dark red. So, going to highlight that with a bit of the ember orange. So that should do it. Now, we need to now make sure everything's completely dry. So we're going to set this aside and wait, because our next step is to put a wash on. And obviously, if any paint's even slightly wet when you throw a wash on, it's just going to mix with the wash and you'll get that everywhere. So in my case, I'm going to get, what was that stuff called again? Ember orange. I'm going to get ember orange all over his mouth, which is not going to look good. It'll look like he's gargling with blood or raspberry jam or something, which orcs do enjoy blood, I know that, but I'm not sure what their stance on raspberry jam is. Anyway, hiatus time. Time for the final step. This is Vallejo Umber Wash, and we're going to just put a little bit of this into the mouth. Obviously it looks a little weird at the moment because of the hugely glossy nature of wet wash, but when that dries, that'll get a bit more subtle and it will really tie the whole face together. That gives you an idea, quite a good idea there, how his mouth looks now the wash is set. Well, it's not quite dry, but it's dry enough that you're not getting the gloss anymore. Get a look at the highlighting on his arms there, and you can see how this actually looks. But that is how I paint natural, I'm doing finger quotes here, natural orc skin. Hopefully that's given you some ideas, and we'll come back to this figure later on and look at how I paint other parts of it. But for now, goodbye.